Across the stars, people whispered about a ship that no one had ever truly seen. It was called the Aegis. The name alone carried weight, as if it belonged to something greater than ordinary machines of war. Merchants passing through asteroid belts told stories of its silhouette, larger than any battleship known in the galaxy. Soldiers sitting in broken bunkers after defeat shared the tale as comfort, speaking of weapons so powerful they could burn entire fleets in seconds. Children on distant colonies grew up hearing about the ship like it was a fairy tale, a bedtime story mixed with hope and fear. The story changed depending on who told it. Some claimed it was built by ancient humans long before the wars even started. Others said it was hidden in secret shipyards, protected by loyal crews waiting for the right moment. A few went further, saying the ship wasn't human-made at all, but a gift from something greater, maybe guardians, maybe gods. Yet no one ever showed proof. No wreckage, no records, not even a confirmed sighting. Every time the story came up in official meetings, alien leaders laughed. To them, humans were too weak, too fragile, too small-minded to build such a thing. They dismissed it as propaganda. But propaganda has power. In the darkest hours of war, when human colonies burned under alien assault, soldiers clung to the story of the Aegis. They imagined it out there, watching, waiting. Pilots on long missions kept themselves awake by retelling the tale over comms, adding details that weren't there before. One pilot swore he had seen its engines glowing in the distance just before his fleet was destroyed. Another swore he heard a deep hum in space, a vibration no one else noticed, right before his life pod was rescued. Aliens mocked the idea even more fiercely as the war dragged on. They called it the ghost barge, laughing that humans told fairy tales because they couldn't face reality. They printed the myth in their propaganda too, but as a joke, as an insult. In alien academies, they showed it as an example of human weakness. See, they dream of magic ships instead of fighting with real strength. Generals told their recruits that if they ever faced the Aegis, it would mean they had gone mad. But the louder the aliens laughed, the quieter their soldiers grew. In private, some admitted unease. There were odd records in alien reports, hard to explain even for them. Fleets of scouts sometimes disappeared without leaving wreckage. Cargo convoys reported strange flashes in the void, like massive shadows moving past, but scanners picked up nothing. Entire communication lines went dead in sectors where no alien or human fleet was present. Whenever strange events like these happened, humans whispered only one name: the Aegis. Among humans, the ship became more than just a story. It was hope given shape. When commanders lost battles, they told their troops, "Hold on, the Aegis will come." When children lost parents to war, they were promised that the fairy tale ship would protect them one day. Whole families believed in it as though it were a promise written into the stars. It didn't matter if no one had ever touched its steel or seen its weapons. Belief was stronger than truth. On colony worlds, artists painted images of it. Towering hulls stretching longer than mountains, cannons glowing like suns, wings that could eclipse a planet. Some drew it silver and bright, a ship of light that cut through the void. Others imagined it dark, like a predator cloaked in shadows, striking only when enemies felt safe. Every version was different, but they all agreed on one thing: it was human, and it would return when the time was right. In quiet moments, even the highest human officers, the ones who swore they didn't believe in fairy tales, wondered if it could exist. Secretly, they scanned the outer edges of space, checking for unexplained energy readings. Secretly, they held back from telling their people to stop believing, because even if it wasn't true, the story gave strength where nothing else could. The legend of the Aegis spread further as the war grew worse. Each defeat made the story stronger, because people needed something to cling to. Entire units carried its name as a symbol: Aegis Battalion, Aegis Squadron, Aegis Division. The name became a banner, a way to fight back with courage even when there was no chance of victory. Sometimes the belief alone made soldiers hold their ground longer than expected. Sometimes it made civilians resist capture when surrender was easier. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was the soul of humanity written into a story. The aliens thought it was foolish, but humans understood something deeper: that hope, even when dressed as myth, could change the outcome of wars. And so the fairy tale of the warship lived on. In every broken campfire circle, in every whispered message sent from one dying soldier to another, in every child's dream of safety, the Aegis was alive. No one could prove it existed, yet no one could silence the whispers. Somewhere in the endless void, hidden or forgotten, maybe even waiting, the ship that was only a legend lingered in the hearts of millions. Would it ever appear? No one knew. But every time the stars flickered strangely or silence fell too quickly on an enemy patrol, someone would lean close and whisper, "That was it. The Aegis is out there." That the war between humans and the alien empire grew worse every passing year. Human fleets tried to defend their colonies, but the alien ships were larger, faster, and armed with weapons beyond comparison. In battle after battle, human warships were reduced to burning wrecks in the void. Colonies that once shone with lights of cities turned into ruins, their skies filled with smoke and fire. Reports of losses came daily, and each new defeat cut deeper into the hope of the people. The alien empire moved with cruelty and pride. They saw humans as nothing more than a fragile race that should have surrendered long ago. Their fleets attacked without mercy, and their soldiers mocked human resistance as if it was a child's game. Whenever a human world fell, the aliens celebrated, declaring it proof that humans were weak and destined to vanish. Inside the human command, morale sank lower with every defeat. Admirals argued in war rooms, but they had no true plan. Supplies ran thin, colonies were scattered, and fleets were too small to face the alien empire's armadas. Human leaders tried to remain calm in front of the people, but behind closed doors, their voices trembled. Every chart, every map showed the same truth. The war was slipping beyond their control. And yet, in the shadows of fear, one thing survived: the whispers of the Aegis. The mythical warship became more than a bedtime story. It became a lifeline. Among tired soldiers, the story was retold in hushed tones as if saying the name alone brought strength. When fleets prepared for hopeless battles, someone always muttered, "Maybe the Aegis will come." It was not said in full belief, but in desperate need, the way a drowning man might pray for a rope. Civilians, too, leaned on the legend. Mothers told their children that the great ship would come to shield them, even when alien war horns echoed above the skies. Fathers whispered it in shelters, promising survival in the face of fire. To them, the ship was more than metal. It was a symbol that humans were not finished yet, no matter how many defeats they suffered. Alien generals laughed whenever the fairy tale was mentioned. In broadcasts spread across conquered colonies, they mocked the humans. "The ghost ship will not save you," they said, grinning with sharp teeth and cruel voices. "It does not exist." To the aliens, this myth was proof of human weakness. They showed their soldiers the story as a joke, a way of saying, "Look at them, too weak to win, so they invent miracles." Their armies roared with laughter, but deep inside, some of their younger fighters wondered if the myth was true. For if it was, what kind of ship could frighten humans into making legends? Among the humans, the belief spread strongest when hope was lowest. In ruined cities, people painted the Aegis on walls, drawing its imagined silhouette soaring across stars. On broken war banners, soldiers stitched its name in rough thread. Entire units called themselves Aegis Division or Aegis Wing, even though no such ship fought beside them. They carried the name into battle as if carrying the ship itself. Even when they lost, the belief did not vanish. It grew stronger and like fire refusing to die. In the war rooms of human high command, some officers scoffed. They argued that such myths only distracted the people from reality. But other officers, those who had seen too many defeats, stayed silent when the subject rose. For in the stillness of space, there were always strange reports. Fleets vanishing, transmissions cut off without cause, strange energy signals too large for normal ships. And each time, someone would whisper, "What if it's the Aegis?" The alien empire, for all its mocking, could not fully ignore those odd disappearances. A few of their scouts never returned. A few of their patrols sent panicked signals before going silent. Officially, they called it accidents or human traps. But in the quiet halls of their command ships, some commanders felt uneasy. For humans, the war was pain, but the story of the Aegis gave strength that no weapon could. It was not just the dream of a warship, it was proof that humans still believed in something bigger than defeat. Each time the aliens called them fragile, humans clung harder to the tale. Each time another colony burned, The story spread wider, traveling from soldier to soldier, from child to child. In a war where humans had lost almost everything, belief became their last weapon, and the legend of the ship was the sharpest edge of that weapon. It made soldiers stand when they should have fallen. It made children sleep in the ruins without screaming. It made commanders plan one more mission, even knowing they would likely fail. The alien empire thought humans were broken, but they never understood one truth. Fragile bodies could still carry unbreakable hope. And that hope had a name, whispered across every battlefield, every burning city, and every hidden shelter: the Aegis. Strange events began to spread across the war zones, and they could not be explained by normal reports. At first, no one paid attention. A single alien scout ship went missing. Then a patrol of 3 cruisers vanished near an empty sector. Their signals ended in silence, cut off as if swallowed by space itself. The alien commanders wrote it down as human sabotage, claiming humans had set clever traps. But deep down, even they wondered how such small human forces could erase entire patrols without leaving wreckage. Soon, traders and smugglers began whispering about odd things in the void. They spoke of seeing shadows too large to belong to any known ship. They described engine flares that glowed for only a second before fading into darkness. One freighter captain swore he saw a silhouette the size of a city drifting past a gas giant. He tried to capture the image on scanners, but the data came back scrambled, as though the machine itself refused to record it. Communication lines started breaking in unusual ways. Fleets that should have been connected by secure channels suddenly lost contact. Entire stations heard vibrations in their signal bands, low hums that resonated like the sound of a heartbeat. Engineers searched for faults in their systems, but found nothing. Some claimed it was natural interference, but others whispered about something else moving in the void, something that bent space around it. The alien empire grew restless. Their soldiers, who once laughed about the human fairy tale ship, began to share nervous glances when these disappearances happened. On long patrols, crews kept their eyes glued to the scanners, frightened by every flicker. Some swore they saw shadows moving faster than light. Some swore they felt the presence of something watching them. When their reports reached high command, the generals dismissed it, ordering them to stop spreading human lies. But even generals could not explain why so many fleets went missing without a single distress call. Among humans, these strange events spread like fire. Every time an alien patrol disappeared, whispers of the Aegis grew louder. "It's out there," soldiers said in their bunkers. "It's watching. It's hunting them for us." Pilots told each other that the great ship was testing its weapons in secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Families hiding in underground shelters prayed that the shadow in the sky above them was not an alien craft, but the legendary protector. Rumors became bolder. Some claimed the ship had a cloak that made it invisible. Others swore it could move through dimensions, appearing and vanishing at will. A few believed that the ship itself was alive, guided not by a human crew, but by a human spirit that refused to let its people fall. The more the aliens denied it, the stronger the belief became. Reports from survivors added to the fear and mystery. One group of human pilots returned from a mission where they were badly outnumbered. They swore an enormous shadow appeared behind them, and alien fire suddenly stopped. When they turned around, the enemy fleet was gone, reduced to drifting debris. The pilots' own ships were undamaged. They could not explain it, but they said one thing with certainty: something had saved them. Alien commanders sent larger fleets to investigate these zones. They expected to find hidden human bases or secret weapons. Instead, they often found nothing but silence and wreckage. Alien wreckage, not human. Some fleets returned shaken, their captains unable to explain what they had faced. Others never returned at all. Every time this happened, humans only smiled and said, "The Aegis has struck again." The Empire tried to spread propaganda to calm its people. They told their citizens that the disappearances were caused by human desperation, that it was only mines or sabotage. But even their own soldiers were not convinced. Too many strange patterns appeared. Too many voices came from the battlefield whispering of a shape in the darkness. The more the Empire tried to laugh it off, the more their fighters grew uneasy. In the hidden corners of the galaxy, some alien merchants even refused to travel near human war zones, afraid they might cross paths with the Phantom warship. Smugglers charged extra to move goods through sectors where the shadow had been seen. Even pirates, who feared nothing, avoided certain regions, muttering that no treasure was worth the risk of meeting the ghost ship. Human leaders did not confirm or deny the rumors. They stayed silent, letting the myth grow. Some of them didn't believe, but they knew the power of hope. Others suspected the truth, but said nothing, waiting to see if the impossible might become real. Across human worlds, the name of the Aegis returned with force. It was no longer just a bedtime story for children. It was now a whisper on every battlefield, a warning to every enemy, a spark of strength for every defender. The galaxy was changing. The myth of the warship, once mocked as a silly tale, was now a presence that everyone felt but no one could prove. It existed between fear and faith, between silence and destruction. The humans waited, holding on to the belief that the ship was out there. The aliens, no matter how loudly they mocked, began to look over their shoulders in the dark. And in the unexplored reaches of space, something vast moved quietly, unseen but not unfelt. The alien armada gathered its strength for a final strike against one of the most important human colonies. The world was called Arion, a planet filled with forests, rivers, and cities that once stood as proof of human growth among the stars. Now it was chosen as the target for complete destruction. Alien generals declared that if Arion fell, the humans would lose all hope of survival. They prepared hundreds of warships, dreadnoughts, carriers, and cruisers, forming a fleet so large that it blocked the light of the stars when it moved. On Arion, the humans knew what was coming. The colony's defenses were small compared to the enemy. The few orbital cannons that protected the skies were old and damaged from past battles. The fleet assigned to defend the planet was barely a fraction of what was needed. Captains looked at their maps and knew the truth. When the aliens arrived, they would be crushed. Some soldiers tried to hide their fear with jokes, but their voices trembled. Others sat silently, staring at the ground, waiting for orders they already knew would mean death. In the shelters below, civilians huddled together. Families packed into underground chambers, children clutching old toys, mothers whispering songs to calm them. Above their heads, the sky filled with strange lights as human ships formed a thin line of defense. People prayed for a miracle, even though miracles had never come before. Some whispered about the Aegis, though their voices were weak, as if afraid to hope too much. The human commanders called their officers together. They knew retreat was impossible. The colony had too many people to evacuate, and the enemy was already near. With tired eyes, they gave their last orders: fight until the end. Every ship, every cannon, every soldier will stand, the admiral said, his voice heavy but steady. We will not surrender. His words carried across the comms, reaching every pilot and gunner. They all knew what it meant. They would fight, and they would die. When the alien armada appeared on the edge of the system, the sight was terrifying. Their ships glowed with power, shields shimmering like waves of light. Their war horns echoed through comm channels, a deep rumble that shook the hearts of everyone listening. The alien generals sent a final message before the attack: "Your fairy tale ship will not save you. Your world will burn today." Then the fleet advanced, darkening the stars behind it. Human ships scrambled to form a wall. Small corvettes and destroyers flew ahead, preparing to buy a few minutes for the larger carriers. Pilots tightened their grips on the controls, whispering farewells to families they would never see again. Ground soldiers manned defense stations, aiming outdated cannons at the sky. No one expected to win. They only wanted to make the aliens bleed before death came. The battle began with fire. Alien weapons struck first, beams of plasma tearing through human destroyers. In the first minutes, 3 ships exploded, their wreckage falling into the planet's atmosphere like burning rain. Human ships fired back, but their shots were too weak against the enemy shields. For every alien ship damaged, 5 human ships were lost. The defenders fought bravely, but each moment brought them closer to destruction. Inside the command center, alarms blared. Reports screamed of ships breaking apart, of defense lines falling. Officers shouted over one another, but the admiral raised his hand for silence. "We fight," he said calmly, though his eyes were wet. "We fight until the last man." On the surface, the people of Arion felt the ground shake as debris rained from the skies. Some screamed, others prayed, but many simply waited in silence, holding hands and hoping for something, anything to save them. The children asked, "Will the great ship come?" Their parents had no answer. As the alien fleet pushed closer, their victory seemed certain. Already they prepared their carriers to launch bombardment on the planet below. The alien generals laughed over open channels, mocking the humans for still resisting. "No fairy tales today," one of them sneered. "Only ash and silence." And yet, in the middle of despair, the whispers did not fully die. A pilot, blood running down his face, muttered into his comm, "Maybe this is when the Aegis comes." His wingmate gave a broken laugh. If it was real, it would have shown itself long ago. Still, they both fought on, as if hoping their words might somehow summon the legend. The sky above Arion burned with explosions. Human ships broke apart one after another. Ground forces prepared for the bombardment that would soon fall upon them. The civilians in shelters closed their eyes, waiting for the fire to come. At that moment, humanity stood on the edge of final ruin. All defenses were failing. All hope seemed gone. The alien armada advanced without fear, certain that victory was already theirs. In that silence, in that hopelessness, every human heart carried the same thought. If the fairy tale was ever true, if the worship of legend was real, this was the time it had to appear. Otherwise, the story of humans would end on Arion, forgotten under alien fire. The space around Arion shook, as if the stars themselves were trembling. Just as the alien fleet prepared its final strike, sensors across the battlefield lit up with warnings. Pilots in human cockpits stared at their screens in disbelief. A massive energy surge appeared on the edge of the system, far stronger than anything they had ever recorded. For a moment, even the alien ships stopped their advance, unsure of what they were seeing. Then space tore open with a flash of light, and a shadow emerged. It was enormous, larger than any dreadnought, larger than any fleet carrier. Its outline stretched across the void like a mountain moving between stars. Human soldiers gasped. Alien commanders froze. The fairy tale had come alive. It was the Aegis. The hull of the ship gleamed with markings that no one had ever seen before. Great lines of steel and light ran across its body, pulsing with hidden power. Along its sides were weapons so vast that entire destroyers could fit inside their barrels. The ship moved with calm grace, as if it had always belonged to the battlefield. Its engines burned with a glow that lit the void brighter than suns. The human comm channels went silent. For a moment, no one dared to breathe. Then whispers began to spread. "It's real. The Aegis is real." Some soldiers cried openly, their fear melting into awe. Others shouted with sudden courage, pounding their controls with renewed strength. The ship they had prayed for, the legend they had whispered in despair, was here at last. The aliens, however, were struck with disbelief. Generals barked orders trying to restore discipline to their fleets, but their soldiers were no longer laughing. The ship that they had mocked for centuries stood before them, no longer a ghost, but a towering wall of steel and fire. Panic rippled through their lower ranks. Some captains even hesitated to attack, as if striking the legend itself would bring doom upon them. The first move came from the Aegis. Without warning, a hum spread across the battlefield, deep and heavy, vibrating through every hull. Panels on the ship opened like the wings of some great beast. A beam of light cut across the void, brighter than lightning, faster than thought. One of the alien dreadnoughts exploded in an instant, split in half as though it were paper. The shockwave sent fragments scattering across space, crashing into smaller ships and tearing them apart. The silence on the human channels turned into roaring cheers. Pilots who were seconds from death screamed with joy. "It's real! It's fighting with us!" Ground soldiers on Arion lifted their heads, watching the sky blaze with strange light, their fear replaced with hope. Children in shelters clapped their small hands, believing the stories told to them had been true all along. The aliens tried to respond, firing their weapons with fury. Beams of plasma, missiles, and cannons all aimed at the massive figure of the Aegis. But as the firestorm struck, the ship shimmered with an unseen shield. Energy rippled across its surface like waves on water, bending every shot away. Not a single weapon could pierce its defenses. It moved forward calmly, like a giant swatting away insects. Then its other weapons awoke. Turrets lined its body, each one unleashing storms of fire. Swarms of drones burst from its hangars, glowing machines that darted through the void like hunting hawks. They tore into alien ships with perfect precision, striking engines, disabling weapons, leaving wreckage adrift. Every strike was clean, every move unstoppable. For the humans, it was like watching a miracle. They had been moments from death, yet now the enemy fleet was burning. Soldiers who had lost all strength suddenly fought harder, inspired by the impossible sight. Pilots dove back into combat with fresh courage, fighting alongside the legend. Ground troops lifted their weapons, shouting the name of the Aegis as if it was a battle cry. For the aliens, fear spread faster than fire, screamed orders, but their fleets broke apart in confusion. Some captains tried to retreat. Others fought in panic, only to be destroyed in seconds. The mighty armada that was meant to erase humanity from the galaxy now faced something they had sworn did not exist. The fairy tale ship had become their nightmare. Inside the human command center, officers watched the battle unfold with wide eyes. Many could not believe what they were seeing. The admiral, who had prepared for certain death, leaned on the console in silence. At last, he whispered, "It's here." His voice shook, but not from fear, from hope he had almost forgotten how to feel. Across the battlefield, the tide had turned. What was once despair now became glory. The Aegis advanced, its weapons tearing holes in the alien fleet. Every beam, every blast felt like history itself, rewriting the fate of humanity. The fairy tale had stepped out of the shadows and into reality, and with it, the impossible had become true. The battle for Arion was no longer about survival, it was about revelation. Both humans and aliens now knew one thing beyond doubt. The Aegis was real, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The silence after the first strike did not last long. The Aegis moved like a beast awakened, slow but unstoppable, and then its firepower opened fully. Along the massive hull, hidden panels slid apart to reveal cannons that glowed with blue-white light. The sound of its engines echoed like thunder across the comms, vibrating through the bones of every pilot, human and alien alike. The first volley came with terrifying precision. A row of alien cruisers lined up to fire, their shields glowing bright. But in a single blast, the Aegis cut through them all. A burning line carved across space, and within seconds, 4 ships were nothing but fragments drifting into darkness. Human soldiers gasped, unable to believe such power was real. Some laughed with joy, others cried, but all of them felt the same. The impossible had come alive before their eyes. The alien commanders panicked. They shouted for their fleets to concentrate fire, and every ship turned its weapons toward the legend. Beams of plasma, missile storms, and heavy cannons all rained down. The void filled with light as if 1,000 suns were exploding at once. But as the storm struck, the Aegis glowed with a shield unlike anything seen before. The energy bent, rippled, and scattered like waves hitting a mountain. Not a single blast reached its hull. The great ship moved forward, unharmed, like a predator ignoring the strikes of insects. Then came the swarm. From the belly of the ship, thousands of drones spilled into space. They were small but fast, glowing with trails of fire as they moved. They darted through the battlefield with perfect coordination, weaving between enemy fire and striking alien ships at their weakest points. Engines went dark, weapons shut down, and entire squadrons fell silent as the drones tore through them like claws. At the center of it all, the voice of a human AI echoed across the human channels. Calm, cold, and steady, it spoke as though war was nothing but calculation. Target locked. Firing. Target destroyed. Each time the voice spoke, another alien ship fell. Soldiers who had been seconds from death listened in awe, as though a guardian had come to guide them. The humans who had almost given up now found their courage return in waves. Pilots who had planned to die in a blaze of glory now fought with renewed strength. "Fight with the Aegis," they cried, diving back into the battle. Ground soldiers on Arion lifted their weapons to the sky, their voices echoing through the bunkers as they chanted the name of the ship. Even civilians, watching the strange lights burn across the heavens, knew the story was no longer just a fairy tale. The aliens, on the other hand, felt terror creep into their hearts. For generations, they had mocked the humans, calling them fragile, calling them weak. But now the warship they had sworn was a lie stood in front of them, tearing apart their greatest armada. Panic spread quickly. Some captains ordered retreat, trying to pull their ships away from the slaughter. Others fought harder, desperate to prove their strength, but their efforts ended the same: wreckage floating in the void. One alien dreadnought, larger than any ship in the human fleet, charged forward with all its weapons blazing. Its cannons lit up the sky, sending shockwaves of fire toward the Aegis. But the great ship did not turn or hesitate. Its front cannon glowed, brighter and brighter, until the entire battlefield held its breath. Then a single beam shot forward, piercing the dreadnought straight through its core. The massive ship cracked apart, split in two, and then exploded in silence, leaving only drifting ash. The alien fleet broke into chaos. The humans cheered wildly across comms. "Did you see that?" one pilot screamed. "It destroyed a dreadnought in one shot." Another cried, "The fairy tale fights for us." Hope spread like wildfire, burning away fear and replacing it with determination. Where moments before they had seen only death, now they saw victory. The alien generals tried to rally their forces, shouting orders, but their voices carried no weight anymore. Their soldiers had seen the impossible, and their courage shattered. Entire squadrons fled, engines burning as they tried to escape. The once proud armada that came to crush humanity was now retreating, broken and scattered. Still, the Aegis did not stop. Its weapons fired with relentless force, each strike precise, each shot deadly. Alien carriers erupted into flames, cruisers shattered, and smaller ships vanished in clouds of fire. The drones hunted the fleeing light, striking engines and sending wrecks spinning into the void. Every moment, the legend grew stronger. On the ground, the people of Arion stared upward. The sky glowed with fire, but it was no longer the fire of their destruction. It was the fire of their salvation. Parents held their children close, whispering, "It's real, it's real." Soldiers who had been ready to die stood taller, aiming their weapons upward with pride. For the first time in years, humanity felt victory. The battle that was meant to end humanity now became the moment of rebirth. The fairy tale ship had revealed itself, and with it, the humans discovered they were not alone in their fight. The whispers that had kept them alive in the darkest nights had turned into truth. And the aliens who once laughed now trembled as their ships burned around them. In the void of space, amidst the wreckage of the armada, the Aegis stood unbroken, its cannons glowing, its shield shimmering like a wall of light. The fairy tale had not only appeared, it had awakened, and the galaxy itself would never forget the fire it unleashed that day. The battlefield that had once been filled with despair was now alive with fire and victory. Human soldiers who had prepared themselves for death found new energy surging through their veins. They fought side by side with the Aegis, and every strike from the legendary ship gave them strength. Fighters that had been running for cover now dove into combat, blasting enemy ships with courage they never knew they had. Even the smallest corvettes charged at alien cruisers, knowing the fairy tale ship was behind them. The alien fleet was collapsing. Once they had advanced with pride, their ships in perfect formation, their commanders confident of crushing the humans forever. Now that formation was shattered. Carriers burned, dreadnoughts floated in ruins, and countless smaller ships tried to flee. The aliens who had laughed at the myth now screamed in fear over open channels. Some begged for orders, others simply ran. Panic spread faster than discipline. Human officers in command centers across the system could hardly believe what they were seeing. For years, they had watched human fleets be torn apart one after another. But now, for the first time, the enemy was retreating. The reports coming in were almost unbelievable. Alien squadrons destroyed, entire lines broken, command ships fleeing into hyperspace. "They are running!" an officer shouted with tears in his eyes. Another whispered, "By the stars, they are afraid of us." On the ground, the people of Arion looked to the skies with wonder. Where they had expected fire raining down on their cities, they now saw the burning wreckage of alien ships falling instead. The air was filled with light from explosions above the atmosphere. Families in shelters cried with relief. Children pointed upward and cheered, chanting the name of the warship as if it were a hero made of flesh and blood. Hope, which had almost vanished, was now alive again. The alien generals tried to hold their forces together, but no voice could stop the chaos. Their soldiers no longer trusted in victory. They looked at the Aegis and saw an unstoppable force. Each weapon strike from the great ship felt like proof that resistance was useless. Captains who once mocked humans now begged to retreat, fearing their entire fleets would vanish if they stayed. And still, the Aegis pressed forward, relentless and calm, its weapons shining like stars. Human fighters took advantage of the panic. Squadrons that had been outnumbered now chased the retreating enemy, cutting down ships that fled too slowly. Pilots shouted encouragement to each other, their voices full of joy. "We have them on the run," one cried. "Push them back." The battlefield, which had begun as a hopeless stand, was now a place of triumph. In the middle of it all, the alien flagship tried one last desperate act. Its commander, furious and humiliated, ordered a direct assault on the Aegis. The ship turned, firing every weapon it had, launching missiles and plasma beams in a storm of light. For a moment, the void lit up as though a sun had exploded. But when the fire cleared, the Aegis remained untouched. Its shield shimmered faintly, glowing with calm strength, and then its main cannon roared. The alien flagship, pride of the Empire, split apart in a single strike. Pieces of its hull scattered into the darkness, and with it, the last hope of alien command disappeared. The retreat turned into a full rout. The aliens no longer fought, they fled. Their formations scattered in every direction, engines burning as they tried to escape the wrath of the human legend. But the Aegis did not let them go easily. Its drones hunted down stragglers, disabling engines, leaving wreckage drifting silently. Human fighters joined the chase, striking down ships that only hours before had been considered unbeatable. For the humans, the battle was more than just survival. It was the birth of something greater. They had always been called fragile, mocked for their weakness, crushed under stronger fleets. But now they had stood with the impossible. They had fought beside their legend, and they had won. The disbelief of the aliens only made the victory sweeter. The fairy tale that once brought only whispers in the dark was now a weapon that had turned despair into glory. On the surface of Arion, people came out of the shelters as news spread. They looked to the heavens where the giant ship still loomed among the stars. It was not a dream. It was not a myth. It was real, and it had saved them. Civilians knelt in the streets, some praying, others simply staring upward with tears in their eyes. Children laughed and shouted, telling each other that the guardian ship had come just like the stories promised. For the first time in years, laughter and relief replaced the sound of sorrow. Across the galaxy, the news of the battle spread quickly. Messages raced through human colonies. The aliens had been defeated, and the Aegis had appeared. Soldiers who had nearly given up their posts now stood straighter. Civilians on distant worlds sang and celebrated. Even commanders who once denied the ship's existence now spoke of it with reverence. The myth had become truth, and the truth had changed everything. For the alien empire, the defeat was devastating. Fear spread through their ranks like a plague. Their leaders tried to deny what had happened, calling the reports exaggerated lies. But the survivors of Arion knew the truth, and their voices could not be silenced. Alien soldiers whispered in their barracks about the ship that could not be harmed, the ship that destroyed fleets in moments. The more they tried to bury the story, the faster it spread. Fear replaced pride, and doubt replaced arrogance. The tide of war had turned. What had been hopeless was now possible. Humans had not only survived, they had struck back. And the galaxy knew that the legend of the Aegis was no longer just a tale. It was a power that would haunt the enemies of humanity and inspire its defenders. The day Arion was saved became the day the galaxy itself began to change. The smoke of battle still lingered above Arion, but the war had already shifted. Where once only despair filled the skies, now wreckage of alien ships floated in silence. Human fleets, broken and battered, circled around the enormous shadow that had saved them. The Aegis stood among the stars like a mountain of steel, its hull glowing faintly with the light of victory. To the soldiers who saw it, the ship was no longer a rumor. It was no longer a fairy tale. It was real, and it had changed everything. Across human channels, voices overflowed with emotion. Pilots who had been seconds away from death cried with relief. Commanders whispered that the galaxy would never again doubt humanity's place in the stars. Soldiers shouted its name again and again, their voices rising like thunder. The Aegis! The Aegis! Their chants carried across the system, reaching every human ear. On the surface of Arion, the people emerged from their shelters. They stepped into streets littered with dust and ash, but above them they saw a sky lit not by alien fire, but by victory. Families pointed upward, tears streaming down their faces, as the massive ship hovered like a guardian. Children tugged at their parents' hands and said, "It's true. The fairy tale was true all along." Some fell to their knees in prayer, thanking the heavens for delivering them. Others simply stood in silence, unable to believe that what saved them was not a myth, but a machine built by human hands. News traveled fast, across distant colonies, across stations hidden in asteroid belts, across every human world that had feared the alien empire. The story spread. Messages carried the same words. The Aegis has come. The legend is real. On planets still under attack, the news gave courage. On colonies preparing for surrender, the news sparked rebellion. Everywhere the words were spoken, hearts lifted and hope returned. The aliens, however, felt the weight of shame and terror. Their empire had always mocked the humans, calling them weak and fragile. Their leaders had used the story of the Warship as a weapon of insult, saying humans depended on myths because they could not build real strength. But now, their fleets had been destroyed by the very thing they claimed did not exist. Survivors spoke of shields that could not be broken, weapons that cut through dreadnoughts like knives through cloth, and swarms of machines that hunted without mercy. Even their greatest commanders could not deny it. The fairy tale had become their nightmare. Fear spread in alien ranks. Soldiers whispered that fighting the humans was no longer just dangerous, it was cursed. Captains avoided sectors where the Aegis might appear. Some refused orders, pretending their ships needed repairs, too afraid to face the legend again. In alien cities, civilians asked if the Empire was truly invincible. Doubt began to eat away at their pride. For humans, the ship became more than steel and fire. It became a symbol. Artists painted its image on walls and banners. Children carved its shape into toys. Soldiers carried its name like a shield, naming squadrons and units after it. Every time the word Aegis was spoken, courage grew stronger. It was no longer a whisper of hope. It was a promise of survival. The galaxy itself began to change. Neutral races who had once stayed silent now looked to the humans with respect. If a people once thought fragile could build such a ship, then perhaps they were stronger than anyone had believed. Diplomats spoke with new pride, no longer begging for peace but offering alliances. Traders, once afraid to cross human space, now carried goods with confidence, knowing the legendary warship guarded the skies. Inside human command, leaders finally allowed themselves to believe. Some had long suspected the ship existed, hidden in secret shipyards, built in silence while the war raged. Others had doubted, thinking it nothing more than myth. But now, all of them saw the truth. Humanity had been preparing, waiting for the right moment to reveal its greatest creation. That moment had come, and it had saved them from extinction. But even with the joy of victory, one question remained unanswered. Where had the Aegis been all this time? No one knew who commanded it. No one knew where it had been hidden or how it had remained unseen for so long. Some believed it was controlled by a secret crew sworn to silence. Others believed an AI guided it, loyal only to humanity. A few whispered that it had always been there, watching from the shadows, waiting for the moment when humans needed it most. The mystery only made the legend stronger. Stories spread quickly. Soldiers told their families how the ship appeared from light itself, how its cannons glowed brighter than suns, how no alien weapon could harm it. Children repeated these tales in schoolyards, their voices filled with awe. Poets wrote verses about the guardianship. Musicians sang songs of the battle where the fairy tale became real. The legend, once fragile and uncertain, now stood unshakable. The alien empire tried to silence the fear, but it was too late. Their propaganda was useless when wreckage of their fleets floated in the void. Their denials were empty when survivors told stories of the ship that destroyed entire armadas. Every attempt to dismiss the legend only reminded their people of their defeat. They had been beaten not just by humans, but by a story that refused to die. For the humans, the Battle of Arion became a turning point. It was remembered not as the day they almost died, but as the day the galaxy changed. It was the moment when myth became reality, when whispers turned into shouts, when despair turned into fire. From that day forward, no one dared to laugh at the legend of the Aegis. Generations later, children would still sit by fires or in classrooms and hear the story. They would hear how humanity was cornered, how the alien empire was ready to crush them, and how, when all hope was lost, the fairy tale ship appeared. They would hear that it saved not only one world, but the spirit of an entire people. And every time the story was told, new voices would whisper the same words spoken on that battlefield. The Aegis is real, and it fights for humanity.